Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about music theory. This video is perfect if you're a self-taught beginner level or maybe even intermediate, but you've taught yourself, so you've basically got some knowledge bits missing along the way. So I'm going to talk about three essential parts of music theory. They are intervals, scales, and chords, which are like three of the most fundamentally important concepts when it comes to understanding music harmony and music theory. And once you understand these essential bricks that make up music, this gives you a solid foundation from which you can understand more deeper concepts. First, we can start by defining these three concepts. So first of all, intervals, that's a way of measuring the distance between two notes. For example, this is called a fifth. This is called an octave. The next thing we're going to talk about is scales. So that's, for example, called a C major scale. Finally, we're going to talk about chords. But first, who am I? My name is Philip. I'm a pianist, composer, and piano teacher. I've been teaching the piano since I was 16. I do my lessons online. So if you're looking for online lessons, then send me a message. I've got some spaces for piano students if you would like. So every note that you'll come across in music is going to be subject to two fundamental qualities, which are basically time, rhythm, and pitch, right? So in this video, we're going to talk about pitch. We're not going to talk about rhythm. That's a separate concept, but we can definitely break things down into these two concepts because harmony exists not across time. Well, in some ways, there's a sequence of harmony, but it's groups of notes. How could we describe this chord, for example? What's actually the harmony that goes on in here? And that's what we want to talk about today, because once you understand kind of the rules of harmony, then you can look at any chord and describe it or define it somehow. The first concept I'm going to show you is the idea of tones and semitones. Very simple. A semitone is from one note to the next door neighbor. All of these are semitones. That's just the smallest distance we have in music. Then the next concept is of a whole tone or a tone. It's also called. These three concepts, they do really overlap with each other, but they do specifically describe three different things. Although there's a big overlap, we're now going to go into them in more detail. So what are intervals? An interval is a way of measuring the distance between two notes, okay? So that basically means that you've got a finite number. You've actually got 12 basically intervals. Each of these 12 distances is called a different kind of interval. Most common one, which everybody knows, is an octave. That's a note on the same kind of frequency but one octave higher. I'm not going to get too technical about that, but I want to keep it really simple for beginners today. So that is just accessible. This is a C, this is a C, this is a C. So inside of these 12 tones, we have what's called a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh, and going up to an octave. A fourth and a fifth are called perfect. Don't ask me why. The second, third, sixth, and seventh are either major or minor. You can actually hear this if you listen to, for example, a major third. You can hear that quality. This one sounds more serious or sad. That's why it's called minor. And this is called major. It sounds more happy, positive. Like a major chord. So just by changing that one note from E to E flat. So to keep things simple in today's video, we're going to talk about everything relative to C, but these concepts transfer to different scales once we get there. But for today, we're going to keep it simple. So for example, here you've got from this C to C pattern, you've got the major. That's when there's a capital M, or a minor when there's a small m. So just to start off with, you can just think of them as those degrees of the scale, the first, the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. And then if they're major or if they're minor. We can start off with the octave, which is always just going to be the same note, one octave higher. That's just always called an octave. A fifth or a fourth, you can think of it in terms of semitones. So you can go from C, zeros, that starts off at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 semitones higher than a C is always going to be called a perfect fifth. On the other hand, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is always going to be called a perfect fourth. And that's actually because they have a quality that pierces through the concept of major and minor. Major sounds always happy. Or minor. It's a minor third and a minor sixth. Major third and a major sixth. Okay, the perfect fourth, I said earlier, you don't ask me why. There is a technical reason, but I want to keep this video really simple. If you would like me to explain further, then I can do that in another video. I can explain these concepts in a bit more depth, but today I want to just really keep it simple. Coming back to this, these are our 12 essential intervals: minor second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth. We have here the tritone, which can be either an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth, a perfect fifth, a minor sixth, a major sixth, a minor seventh, a major seventh, and back to an octave. Now, if you hear these intervals in music, you might realize that they get described differently if you hear them or if they're written down. For example, if you saw in music written down C and F sharp, then you'd say that that's an augmented fourth, because from C to F is a fourth, and then it's augmented up to that F sharp. If you saw it written as C G flat, then that would be a diminished fifth, even though it's just C to this one, right? It's still the same tritone, but it would just be written differently depending on the context of the music. And this kind of applies to all of them. This is why this idea, it's a little bit different in when you hear it and if you see it written down. For example, you can see C and D sharp, and then next to it there's C and E flat. That's the same note, but it would be called either an augmented second or a minor third. But if you heard it in the music, you'd always describe it as a minor third. That would be like the preferred way of calling it. That's why all of these, besides the tritone, which has the augmented or diminished option, they're all written as one thing. And musicians we would just tend to call this a tritone. You can hear it's a really uncomfortable kind of interval. And in music, you can have this concept of dissonance and then resolution. Yeah. So it creates this tension and then this feeling of resolution. So next I'm going to talk about scales. Now, the first scale that we're always just going to start from is just going to be a simple major scale from C to C, like this. That's just a major scale. The quality is a whole tone, a semitone, whole tone, semitone. And that's the pattern for every single major scale. It's always going to be like that. In this video, we're just going to talk about C major, just to keep it simple, but you can have a major scale starting on every single note. That's a bit more advanced music theory. I want to keep it simple today. That's why we're going to talk about the circle of fifths, which is a system by which we describe or find any major or minor diatonic scale. But today we're going to work on the key of C major, just working within the bounds of C major. So if we play all the white notes from C to C, that makes a major scale, right? We also have minor scales. There's a few varieties of minor scales. So that's called a minor harmonic scale. We also have a natural minor So the simplest way of thinking about it, right? If we've got this major scale, we're going to lower the third note by one semitone and lower the sixth note by one semitone, and we arrive at the harmonic minor scale. And if we also lower the seventh note, we arrive at the natural minor scale. So that's two essential scales which we want to work from. Now, we might talk about this as the first degree of the scale, the second degree of the scale, third, fourth, fifth, sixth degree of the scale, etc., seventh, and reaching back to the tonic. There's a couple of different scales which are worth mentioning. Actually, you can probably think there's an almost infinite amount of scales, because it's basically any group of notes that you're going to play in a key. You have major pentatonic scale, which sounds super positive. Remember in the beginning we talked about this concept of the tritone, where we had it over here. That was our uncomfortable interval. Well, in a major scale, there is a hidden tritone. Can you believe it? From F to B, there's a tritone, right? So that's between the fourth and the seventh degree of the C major scale, which means if you hear that inside of the C major scale, it sounds a bit uncomfortable. So what do we do in a major pentatonic scale to make it really simple? We just get rid of that. And we end up with 5 notes, and these always just sound really cool together. You can improvise with these, and let's give a little whirl. There, I just improvised a little bit, and because I was sticking to those notes, everything sounded consonant and harmonic. There wasn't any dissonance, which would be created if you might hear that suddenly, spontaneously in an improvisation. A couple more scales. You have a chromatic scale, which I don't know if it really counts as a scale. It's more maybe a technique that we use when we're practicing on an instrument. But yeah, it is technically still a scale. There's one really cool one called a whole tone scale, which the composer Debussy used because it's made up of all whole tones, right? So remember we were talking about semitones and whole tones. There's a whole tone. The next whole tone is going to be F sharp here. And that means that on an instrument or on a piano keyboard, you can only have really 2 technically whole tone scales, either this one or this one. There's also a kind of weird jazz scale called a whole half scale, which sounds really cool. It means that every next note is either a whole half step or a whole step, right? So a semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone. Really interesting scale. And that kind of leans us towards this idea of a jazz scale, which is very similar, where you can just hear the jazz in that. Yeah, you can improvise really simply on here. It's super, super nice scale, right? So in the key of C major, that's going to be C, E flat, F, G, B flat, C. It's the minor pentatonic scale. This is the jazz scale. We're adding just one more note. It's the F sharp here, which is actually the tritone. And it's interesting how it's just... Yeah, so that's just messing around with the jazz scale. Remember we had the major pentatonic, the minor pentatonic, and finally we end up on the idea of chords. So 2 very simple chords you might have heard is a major and a minor chord. Again, the quality of major, it sounds happy, kind of, and minor sounds sad or serious. So let's talk in terms of semitones. You will always create a major scale by going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's always a major scale. Doesn't matter where you start. I said we're going to stick to C major, but let's just throw it somewhere else on the keyboard. Let's go to F sharp. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, 2, 3. We have created an F sharp major chord. And conversely, the minor, again, so that's me 3 and 4. That's F sharp minor, right? Let's stick to C because I always find it easier to see things when they're on C. I see things easier when they're on C. So C major, C minor. Okay, there's two more qualities of chords which I'd also like to touch on. They're called diminished and augmented chords. So it was 3 semitones. Now if we go another 3 semitones, again the tritone, dreaded tritone. That's a diminished chord which kind of wants to go to, it wants to resolve that. So that's a C diminished chord. And one more is the augmented chord. That's if we have a major chord, again the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an augmented chord. So these are 4 fundamental chord qualities which kind of everything is built from. There are a lot more potential chords. Like, for example, I've got in this chord chart which just kind of goes a bit ham. Remember I was saying how everything's starting on C. But I wouldn't get too afraid or like shocked or afraid of this if you're maybe a non-musician or a beginner musician, because all of these things kind of build up from each other. I mean, like I would be able to figure out every one of these chords, but that's just because once you understand the keys, once you understand the basics, then everything is kind of just built up, you know, more bricks on the wall. But once you understand the foundation, it's just more concepts building on top of that. In intervals, we can say that there's basically just 12 intervals. In scales, we could say that there's, you know, maybe kind of like a finite amount. When you come to chords, you can, I mean, anything could be a chord. That's some kind of chord. You could name that in some way. It kind of amuses me when people ask, like, what's that chord? What's that chord? Because, I mean, anything, literally, I mean, you can just be like, and find some kind of way to describe it. It just depends on if it's more or less coherent. Something like, you know, a C major scale, C major chord. That's just a C major chord. But if I go, for example, or if I, that's still a C major chord. We've still got C, G, E. Yeah, but they've been spread out, so it's called a different voicing. And even though it's the same chord, it's going to have a different quality when it's spread out like that. I'd definitely love to talk more about the circle of fifths, but that's totally information for another day. That's a more advanced video. Today we're just going really aimed at beginners. But yeah, if you want to see a video about the circle of fifths, then write a comment below and I'll be sure to create one. And now it's time, Phil's secret magic sauce for chords. Now we've built up all of those concepts along the way. We've reached the magic primary triads, as I call them. I remember learning this when I was a teenager in music lessons, and it's stuck with me, and I still use this ever since. So let's tie all of these beautiful concepts that we've learned today up together. So in the key of C major, we can have a major chord of C, and then we can have so in the key of C major, there's essentially 7 primary chords, primary triads, which we can use to make music with. So yeah, we've got these chords in the key of C major. Now we're going to make them sound very cool. We're going to start playing some music. Finally, after all of this talk about music, let's actually play some music. Imagine I'm just playing this chord of C. This is cool. We can do some stuff with this. Okay, but eventually we're going to get a bit bored. We're going to want to go somewhere else. Where are we going to go to? We can go to chord number 5. This is G, B, D. Let's bring this up on the screen so you can still see what I'm talking about. here a bit too long. It's called a dominant chord for a reason. It wants to go somewhere. Where does it want to go? It wants to go back to C. Then we're back home. Those are the chords we just played. Those are the 7 degrees of the scale, and they each have different specific kind of qualities. So C major, the second chord in a major scale, D, is actually going to be D minor. Remember, we've got the 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Second chord is actually minor, and actually only chord 1, 4, and 5 are the perfect ones, which is interesting when you plug that into the information that intervals work on this concept of perfect, right? 1, 4, and 5 are the perfect intervals, and they're also the only major ones in a major scale. Interesting, right? E is going to be E minor, A is going to be A minor, and the last chord naturally has that weird tritone because it wants to go to resolve into C major. So those were our 7 primary triads inside of a major scale. Yeah, and we can make some music with it. We started off with C major. We can go to G major. Those are our kind of 2 essential chords. If we want to have some kind of movement, we want to go a bit tonic, and then a bit dominant, and back to tonic. What we can also do is venture out a little bit further. What about if we add into the mix the subdominant and the submedian, or whatever these words, let's just call it chord 1, 4, 5, and 6. 1, 4, 5, and 6. And if you listen to this, these 4 chords appear throughout all music, or a lot of modern music, a lot of music, 80% of music just uses those 4 chords in some kind of sequence. 1, 5, 6, 4. 1, 5, 6, 4. Yeah, so that's the basis. We can also go 1, 6, 4, 5. 1, 6, 4, 5. We could crank it up into a minor scale. So there's a lot of concepts here along the way which we can break down even further, but I just wanted to give you a bird's eye view essentially in this video about what these concepts are, without getting too technical, just to keep it simple for beginners. Great, so I hope you found that video useful. Whilst we're on the subject of making music with these 4 chords, we can actually make it much simpler, especially if you're a beginner. We might want to just go really, really simple. Much more fun to just go maybe, for example, 1, stay on 1 for a bit longer. For example, 1, 4, 5. What about if I go to 6? No, we don't like chord 7, do we? Maybe chord 2? No. What about 3, 4? Okay, that's kind of interesting. 1, 3, 4. 3, 4, 1. What if I go 3, 5? I kind of like number 3. That's just some ideas for like loose kind of progressions you can play around with. I hope this video kind of given you some inspiration for things you can take, experiment with, and make them your own, because that's really what we're trying to do, is build up a vocabulary so you're a competent musician, an independent musician, so you understand the concept of the 12-tone harmony system, what these chords do, what they mean, how to use them, how to play with them yourself. You might see I'm using kind of things like this. That's still that F chord, but it's a bit, I could play it, but I'm playing it here. Yeah, so take these ideas, do with them what you like, mess around with them, make it your own, get creative, and yeah, if you found this useful, I hope you've learned something. Leave me a comment if you would like me to go into more depth. I'd love to make more of these tutorials. I'm super fired up for this. I finally got my setup, my workstation locked in, and I'm really chuffed to bits. So yeah, I hope you found this video useful. And yeah, send me a message or write me a comment with any ideas, and we can get into it. I'll see you in the next one. Remember to subscribe. Bye.